here, it's really exciting for me. See, I even prepared, I took notes. And I was getting ready to introduce those guys, but Lenka did a great job. And just a couple of things I have, in my notes. Did you know that Patrick was actually heading the Red Cross in Colorado before joining Global Accelerators? So he was saving lives. Now he's saving entrepreneurs. I love it. It's like great analogy. And Pavel, you know all, but did you know that Pavel is one of the best people with old cars in Czech Republic? He's the guy who actually saves old cars, the cars that go and people throw them away, like old Felicia and stuff. Pavel actually takes them and he saves them. Right, Pavel?
I have just 10 cars.
Yeah, just 10 cars. Come on, guys. Just 10 cars. And if you look at his blog, it's really cool. Because I was really amazed. How many of you do remember the small Russian game called Vayichka? Hey, there's 5, 6. Wow, great. I thought I was old, but you are older. Great. So he's got a picture of this at his blog. And he even talks at TED about extended minds. He's not about like internet or extended mind. It's really, really cool. And I have a lot of questions for him about this. And David, it's really cool because, enterprise software, enterprise things are the things of Prague. How many of you know Roman Staněk? So, do you know what his first company was? His first successful company? Huh? Yeah, thanks. I know you know. It was Java, right? It was Java company. So David's company was actually Java, right? As well.
Yeah, that's right. I first worked for a company that actually competed with NetBeans, and then went on to do another one.
Then he stopped and did the successful company, right? And Imre, it's really interesting to see, and he's got a lot of experiences from Hungary. He's gonna share with us the view and kind of the story of financial people, right? Because he's the financial people now, right?
Well, more or less, yeah. I mean, I'm sitting on both sides of the table sometimes, yeah.
Both sides of the table. So there's a blog, both sides of the table, right? I think that all of you actually read this blog. But anyway, let's go. I have three kind of questions for you guys, and I try to put in kind of, there's a big topic that's been around for a couple of weeks, and I actually believe that when Nicola wrote me about if I would moderate this discussion, it was like, hey, you wrote an article, and it was a really nasty article. Could you come and be really nasty with our panel discussion, just yell at them, scream at them, be really nasty. I was like, no, I don't want to do this. It's like, hey, let's come. So the first topic for me, and I believe that for you as well, is the government fund, is the seed fund. Just for you guys, we have this initiative here that the European Union said that, hey, we'll give you some money, you entrepreneurs, and the Czech government said, yes, we'll give you some money and we'll do it this way, And we have a big discussion if, first, the government should actually intervene with startup scene, and the second, if they do it in the right way. And I was discussing a little bit with Patrick before, and there's a big initiative, and Global Accelerators, I believe, are part of this initiative, which is Startup America, right? And I believe there is a 1 billion funds as part of this initiative. So, for us, US is like to be known as the most liberal country in the world, so government doesn't help anyone, right? You have to help yourself. You don't even have health insurance, so, nobody helps you.
Not yet.
Yeah, well, and we will not do it. So why does the government give you money? It's like so anti-startup.
Yeah. So I think first of all, the government doesn't need to give money. There's enough capital today to support entrepreneurs. I mean, if you go between Y Combinator and Techstars, there's each year probably 140 companies that are coming out of both of those accelerators, and almost all of them are getting some sort of seed capital.
So why does Obama do it? Is it an election campaign? Or?
Why doesn't Obama do it? I think there's no need for it, at least in the States. But I'll put it this way. So in the stimulus package, many of you know that the states had a stimulus package. There's something a little over $1 trillion that was part of the stimulus package. Of the $1 trillion, there was $1 billion that was set aside for accelerators in the states. It's called the SBIC fund, if you get a chance to look it up. The interesting thing about the SBIC fund is no one has heard about any of the money coming from it. It's this in the black.
Tunel, super.
So if you find that 1 billion, let me know where it is. Honestly, we're not getting much government help.
So what are they doing with the $1 billion? They just
Honestly,
sit on it, or?
You know, I met with the person who's running it a month ago, and I think they're trying to do initiatives through universities and through large organizations, but none of it's really trickling down to startups.
But we actually do have 2 examples of government, intervene. One is Finland, right? And the second one is Hungary. And I talked with you guys a little bit about this. Can you give us your view on this and how it works?
Okay, so I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with government intervention to help having a startup ecosystem. If you look at the history of Silicon Valley, there was a very strong reason for government to be involved. It was to stimulate, technological growth during the Cold War, and it was extremely successful. And so that was a very good thing. If you look at Israel, the government is very strongly supporting also the R&D and the startups and all that. So we have 2 very good examples, and South Korea had the same in the 80s and 90s, and Japan the same thing. Now if you look at examples more recent and right now in Finland, not quite as successful sometimes. Because very often government money comes from people who don't run startups. And that means that it comes with performance metrics, that meaning that like your government will have something like, hey, let's do a program to help entrepreneurship. This entrepreneurship thing is going to be hot right now for the next X years or whatever. So let's give them, 1 billion or X 100 million or whatever, and let's see how much return we get on that. And so you have government people who are going to start looking at your metrics, at your milestones, and say, you didn't match that, you started failing. And obviously you're going to fail if you do startups because more than 80% of your attempts will fail, so it's in the long run. So the problem with government money is that when it comes with strings attached, and those things are done by people who don't know what they're doing. I think that we've had very good examples recently of programs like the Vigo program that's been trying to be very innovative. They've had very long discussions with Steve Blank to discuss how the government should approach these kind of programs and how it should support the startups. And most of the time it's basically get out of the way and support money-wise with like don't be the lead investors and don't be the one setting the rules in your shareholders agreements or anything like that, but it gets there.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Steve Blank because I was going to ask about this. He was here 3-4 weeks ago, and we had a discussion with him, and he said, well, I believe that government should be part of starting the ecosystem, but it should have a clear plan how to get off the track. And he was mentioning actually Finland, that it's not one of the best examples that the government would get off, so does it stop being involved, or should it stop being involved, or how?
Hopefully.
Yeah, but you are the opposite. They are very liberal, you are very socialist.
Okay, so I think Finland is a very good example of a state that's extremely powerful, extremely present. You have a very high percentage of tax, and then you have the government given education and health and all those things. So very strong interference, basically, a tendency for interference in those kind of matters. Now, is it possible to do a startup without being involved with the government money, basically? In Finland, very much so. Are they actively interfering with startup development? Yes, they are currently. I mean, essentially, what's difficult when you have government money is that it seems easier than convincing an investor. It seems that government will give you 500K, 1 million or whatever because they have this young innovation whatever program. And what happens there is that you get lazy and you get startups that don't fail as fast. If you get money in the bank for whatever reason, it's just much easier. So,
and you spend all your time in sauna, right?
We do. Sauna. We actually do. The good thing now is that we have a few success stories. For example, the guys behind Lifeline Ventures now have their own fund. And these are guys that did 3 exits before, and they've done several rounds of funding. They've got lots of contacts in the Valley and London and all that, and then they know how it's done now. So we're having these generations, and hopefully in a couple cycles we'll get to a point where it's easier.
So basically your point is you believe that the government should be involved, but there should be certain borders and no strings attached. Imre, when we talked about this, you mentioned a very interesting thing about how is the fund managed in Hungary.
In 2009, when the funds were announced, the government-sponsored venture funds, we started a course on entrepreneurship. There were 3 participants on the first event. We thought that it's going to be a failure. Anyways, the program started. The way the Hungarian Jeremy venture capital program is working is that they gave 200 million euros to 8 funds. Now, each fund has about 70% of the fund from the government. The private source actually is keeping an eye on what's happening with the money. So these funds actually operate like investment boards. They are very careful. It's not the usual, government handout for free kind of money. It's very, very, very strategic. They really think through what they are doing. Right now, it's 2012. We have about 800 people in the Budapest entrepreneurship ecosystem. There are meetups. There are first Tuesdays, or the equivalent of that, first Mondays. There is a very, very vibrant ecosystem. There are more seed venture capital funds. There is life, actually. So there is something that the government did, or actually let it happen, that actually really served the Hungarian entrepreneurship community. So now there is 200 million euro that is still not spent, and there will be another about 100 million euro that is added to this.
But I mean, actually, he mentioned one interesting thing, that when companies get money from government, they get lazy. They get fat and lazy. So do you have any success stories coming out of the government money?
Yes, in this case, as I emphasized, there is an investment board, and they are keeping an eye on the company very closely. Pretty much every week there is a meeting. So we at Primus,
can you name 2 companies which were?
Yeah, there is. Let's say there is Comforce, which is a cloud call center and contact center company. There is let's say Intellio, which is an intelligent camera company. Which have received multiple rounds of financing from multiple VCs, which is completely unheard of in Hungary. That one investor would team up with another one. So there is a lot of good development happening, and I think that the major difference from the usual government funding to this is that here there is a private element, and the private investors don't let crazy things happen that governments typically do.
That's actually. Go ahead, David.
Can I just jump in for a sec? My company was actually one that benefited from government funding. So in the beginning, when we were getting launched, we didn't have a lot of money for marketing.
In Estonia or in Czech?
In Estonia. We didn't have a lot of money for marketing or for other things. We devoted almost all of our resources to development, and I think in most tech startups, that's exactly what you should do. But we started to try and reach abroad and reach into other countries and make this really global. And we were able to get some of the Estonian fund in order to do that. It was a grant. It took some paperwork to deal with. They'd like to check up on it. I think weekly checkups might be a bit intense for a startup because
we are control freaks.
Yeah, that's a bit much. But we were able to kind of get up and off the ground, and I mean.
And move to Czech.
Actually, we started up a bit here, and then we moved to Boston. So now we've got 4 offices in 3 countries.
So we have a success story from government. Perfect. Well, anyway, let's just put this topic aside for a moment. I will come back to Pavel actually as well. But you mentioned, Patrick, and it's on my list as well, one thing which was giving back. You said that when you email Jason Fell, he just goes to coffee with you and stuff. And some of you mentioned that, new young entrepreneurs and stuff. So one of my big questions or themes is like, how, why, and should, is there a moral obligation for successful entrepreneurs to give back? And is there a moral obligation for successful companies to give back to their local ecosystem? And how do we find new entrepreneurs? They don't grow on trees,
It's a lot of questions.
Wow.
No, I think there's no moral obligation for somebody to mentor, without a doubt. But what I think you'll find is that as you mentor and as you give to companies, you'll be surprised how much comes back to you. And I think that's what we see a lot. I keep talking about Techstars, but if you go to Techstars, it's amazing how many of those mentors ultimately maybe even work for that company down the road. Some of them even have become CEO. When the current CEO would step down and they needed a business person, that mentor would become the CEO. Or that mentor then somehow makes a connection, and then that connection then gives business to that mentor. Not because they have to, just because it just everybody else is helping one another. So I think for us, we might be crazy, but we really think that if you give, somehow it'll come back to help you down the road.
Well, it's one of the things that Steve Blank mentioned. He said, well, we tech entrepreneurs are actually crazy. We make money and we spend it in angel investments. So,
yeah.
But anyway, could you pass the microphone to Pavel? Because I would like to know his opinion on this. And actually, Ivosh's opinion on this.
Look,
well, actually, I will. Well, the Seznam is famous for not being involved in startup environment. So, what are your reasons for not being involved?
Why do you think that we are not involved in startups?
Well, okay, guys, just raise your hands. How many of you have become acquainted with Seznam, and how did they help you in your startup kind of roadshow? Or? Okay, do we have one hand? No, so that's why.
No one. Okay.
That's why I think.
Okay, we just started. You
just started like Seznam? Or?
No. Seznam is here on market many years, but we just started to help new projects, and we are now involved in quite all startup accelerators here in Prague, and we are starting to prepare some investment budget for some startups.
Are you going to do the way as Google does it, through Google Ventures or as Index Ventures, or?
No, we will make it in-house.
Yeah. Perfect. I think you should give a hand to Seznam. Thanks. I do really believe it's very important, because Seznam is such a strong player in the Czech ecosystem that I've been talking about this for years, and I believe that once Seznam gets involved in the startup ecosystem, it will actually change or help change the game. So thanks for this. And Rami, you mentioned that in Finland, there's actually big, Skype guys and stuff, come back in Nordic.
Sure. I think the role of mentors and role models that are homegrown is very important, because fundamentally the job of being a startup entrepreneur is crazy. It's not a rational thing to want to go and spend most of your money and energy and stuff on something that is very likely to fail. So that aspiration to go for something that your dream basically must come from someone who inspires you. And that's so okay, in the Valley you have Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and all these people. In Finland it was more difficult. So one effort that we did very early on was to try to get the people from MySQL, the people from Linux, the people from who invented IRC, the people from F-Secure, the antivirus company, to try to come and inspire students to say, well, you can do it actually. And if you look at not just your hometown, but the region, it's very helpful. So definitely people from Skype and a great inspiration. To get back to the question, is there a moral obligation for helping the community? I think yes. If you're part of a community, I think giving back to the community is part of that game, basically. So it definitely stimulates entrepreneurship, and it's definitely a good thing.
It's really interesting, Imre. And how is it in Hungary, basically?
It's very similar. Actually, throughout all the events and all the meetups and all the courses, we always emphasize that giving back to the young entrepreneur generation is very important. But I guess it's almost like in the nature of entrepreneurship. I mean, if you don't cooperate, you don't get anywhere. So that's almost like a repetition of the same process. It works in Budapest. Well, actually, Hungary and Budapest is pretty much the same when we talk about the Hungarian ecosystem. There are about 24 people who can be called the role models, who already have done something, had a successful exit, or still run a successful company, and they do show up very, very often. And sometimes it's very interesting that more senior people or mentors show up because they are enjoying what they are doing, and not enough in the last year or so, there are enough young entrepreneurs. So finally, they start to realize that it's not enough to think on their own in a room somewhere with a small team, but they have to open up.
And do you somehow work with students, trying to inspire them to become entrepreneurs? Or because like in Czech, Patrick mentioned that to be an entrepreneur in tech is like the coolest thing in the US now. It's not in Czech.
It's amazing. At the European Entrepreneurship Foundation, we did a venture accelerator course, and 2 professors from universities, 2 different universities applied, and they were teaching entrepreneurship, but they were sort of doing the homegrown Hungarian version of entrepreneurship, and they had not many ideas about internet entrepreneurship. So they became great avenues and channels for distribution of ideas and distribution of news, and they invited us to speak at those courses. And there were many students who actually finally realized that it's not only government grants and not only someone else's stolen idea that they can actually work with, but they can actually form a team, and the team is the most important thing. So yeah, there is a very strong circulation now in Budapest, and I think that, I don't know if you guys heard about it, but there are 5 really successful Hungarian startups, and they are all doing the same thing. They're all giving back, and they always show up at events and they speak for free. They are really very open and very contributing.
That's really inspiring to hear. And David, you went through Estonia. Estonia is known for being very advanced in technology. You can vote, right, through internet in Estonia actually. You've been through Czech, and now you are in the US. So how would you compare? As an entrepreneur, how did it feel for you?
It's interesting. I think for the last couple of years, I was really focused on my company. Now I'm finally getting the chance to take a step back, and I was in Boston for the last 6 months, and it's just amazing like Patrick was saying earlier, the number of daily meetups, gatherings, coffees, just events. You can go to 20 or 30 events a day.
Is it alcoholic events or non-alcoholic?
Some of them, yes. Some of them have alcohol. Now, that might be a little more common over here.
Yeah,
But I'd love to see the Czech Republic get to that level. Estonia's starting to. It does have some Skype heritage as well. So there's a lot of employees there, and there's some Garage 48, and there's other companies that are really trying to get the startup scene launched. But I think we've got a lot of work to do to catch up to the US right now, in Estonia included.
Well, it's interesting, Pavel. I know that you had some initiatives with students couple of years ago. So how did it evolve? What do you do with students? Do you try to inspire them?
We try to help them show the real life, not just the university life, because the problems they are solving on the universities are not so real, if I can say it. So we have some meetings with students where we are showing how to make a service which is under heavy traffic, and how to make user interface to be usable, and so on. So we are continuing.
So it's actually you take them inside your company, you give them some scholarships, or you teach them at the university?
Both, but mainly at the university.
Okay. And Ramin, you wanted to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, if the question is about how do you inspire students, and it's not so much about role models, then I'd say there's 2 ways that we found have been working really well. One is to get students to create a startup. So we've created this program called Summer of Startups, where we get students to actually create a startup during the summer for 2 months instead of getting a shitty summer job, and try it out and see how it is. And if it fails, it's okay. I mean, you just try something in summer. And that worked extremely well. The other one being a program we call Startup Life, where we send very good students, the best students from Finland, abroad in foreign startups. So startups in the Valley and New York and all that. And they get to learn from there. And that works extremely well, basically. But you don't need to have local role models to just go and get experience. You can just send people and try it out, basically.
Well, I'm actually really glad that you mentioned Summer of Startups, because that initiative was started in Czech Republic. And Czech was always perceived as a very technical country. Our engineers were at the top with Hungarians and Russians and stuff, and mathematicians were very top. And I remember when I started in internet, which was 98, 96, or whatever, you know, all the guys were tech guys. You know, Pavel is a tech guy, right? You are originally a programmer, right? So, but nowadays, you know, the summer of startups started, and there was basically no engineers. There were people from marketing, there were people from corporations coming up with ideas, but no engineers. Did you guys, you know, experience something like this before? Because, like, for me, the tech startup was always, you know, the engineers get together, you know, so.
Well, in Finland, very much so, and I think that's great, actually. I mean, that you know, the entrepreneurship scene we got in Finland has been very much driven by Aalto, and Aalto being the biggest university in Finland, and the whole scene has been organized by business students who had no programming, hacking, or anything skills. They just wanted to try to create, they understood the need, the burning need for startups, because the whole social state we have was going to go down, and so you had to create new stuff. And they learn, you know, so they started finding basically get-together events, and then some of them started to learn coding and all these things, and project management and design and all these things. And it's perfectly fine. It's just about connecting those dots. You can't have a tech scene that's just techies, I think.
Anyway, how does it work in Hungary?
Well, it has about 3 years. I mean, we can talk about Hungarian ecosystem for the past 3 years. In the beginning, it was very much dominated by geeks, and in the last, I would say, last year, there are people who show up who could have a marketing job, who could have a finance job somewhere else at Morgan Stanley, but they are sort of dipping their toes into the scene because now it became acceptable in the mind of the general public, and they see that there is a lot of talk about it, not only in Hungary but in
yeah. But how do you find them engineers? Well, it's nice that people from marketing come to tech startups, but when you don't have people to actually do the job.
Yeah, there is a very interesting. I don't know how much it is common here in Czech Republic, but there's a special kind of arrangement within universities. It's called a spin-off club. And the spin-off club actually operates in a way that if you're a student and you have an idea that you would like to accomplish, you would like to build it into a startup, that spin-off club actually gives it ground and then shows it to investors, and that is typically a very good source for technical talent. Now, some of those people who are actually standing up there and they talk as a CTO of a new startup, they know 5, 10, 15 other people who are good at programming. So we actually have to go to universities and talk to them, and then they are actually responding very positively.
Oh, that is very interesting, but it basically has its limits. I would like to ask Patrick. There is an initiative like I don't know if it was from Techstars, but Code Academy. I believe it's actually funded by Jason Feld, if I'm correct. And they have the theme or Team Treehouse that you can teach anyone to code. Well, to be honest, I have 21 badges in Team Treehouse and Code Academy, but I can't do it. So what do you think about this, and how do you solve this problem in the US?
I mean, it's one of the things I'm personally trying to solve. I think if you're starting a company, not only do you have to come up with the idea, but you have to have a team. To get into any top accelerator, you have to come in with a team. There are no one-person founders throughout the accelerator land. So I think just like you have to solve problems every day in a startup world, you have to go out and find programmers. And honestly, I think that's why the Czech has a leg up, because you do have programmers who are working for big companies who would love to go work for a startup. So I really think it's just going out there and finding them. In the States, that's why programmers are making $90,000 as a startup salary and $120,000 if you have your master's, because they are that much in demand.
So it's only about the money?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they're in demand. And I'm saying it's really hard to find them. That is the issue. If you can learn how to program, you're going to do well.
Okay, guys. Well, our time is actually basically up. One more question. Do you have any question you would like to give these guys, one of you to other? Okay, it's up. Thanks. So now, do we have any questions from general public? No questions? Raise your hand who wants to ask something. It's one in a lifetime opportunity to get this board, here. It's really, you can ask Pavel about something. Why do they do something, Or you can ask, other guys. So, questions? Honzo. See the red hair? He's got a question. Well, if you don't have questions, I can ask
prepared
one.
questions first. Prepared questions first.
Well, okay, anyway, so if you have questions, just yell, we'll come back to it. But anyway, I have one more question, Lenka said that 54% of people here are entrepreneurs, and they are tech entrepreneurs. So I believe on their mind, coming from Prague and local environment, is can I really make it big? Can I really make it global? And if you have one thing that you would actually, you've observed the Czech startups for a couple of days, so if you have one thing that is missing here, or that you actually see that they are not doing and they should be doing, could you share with us, Patrick?
Yeah. I think Czech entrepreneurs are great engineers and great at design, without a doubt. Where I think, and I'm going to say this, and I think everyone in the room knows this, it all comes down to selling the idea and selling it appropriately. I would say if there's something that you can learn how to do, it's watching pitch videos from companies in the States, because that's what investors are used to seeing right now. So however you can learn how to pitch appropriately, and I think we're going to see some great pitches tonight to use as examples. I would just say the overall feeling I get is that we need to learn how to sell the idea a little bit better.
Well, Seznam is very good at selling their idea locally. So, Pavel, do you have any idea how to take your local experience globally? Or are you going to try to take your local experience globally?
We are just focusing on the local market, because we don't want to waste our time, and we want really focus on things we know well. So,
are you afraid of Google outside Czech?
I don't think so, but we are a very small company with many of services, and we don't have enough in-house power to make some global expansion. So when we will do it, it will influence some Czech.
And will you encourage the companies? You said you're going to invest in companies. Are you going to be seeking local companies or companies with global potential for your investments?
Mainly local companies because of Seznam, but we are starting to think about some global issues.
Okay, thanks, Rami.
All right, so I don't think there's really much missing in the sense that the products we've seen, there's some beautiful products. They're really well made, well coded, well designed. I want to use them, okay? And I didn't know about them before, so that's really good, okay? There's a lot of good skills and driven people here who want to make it. That's all you need, basically. The one thing that's missing is experience. It's the data. It's having faced several failures and knowing what can go wrong and prepare for that. And how do you make your one tiny project into a scalable organization that you can go and sell to people? And for that, my advice is to get out of the country, go to the web, go to DLD, go to the Slush conference, go to the what's it called, Founders something, Pioneers Festival coming up, go to the Valley, go to Israel, and check out how it's done, basically.
I think to look at the question and say, should we build companies that are local focused or global focused? I don't think that's really the right question. The question is, can you build a company that serves its target audience the best? If its target audience happens to be local, build the product that serves the local audience. If the audience can be global, and you can define your audience like that, then you need to build a company that's going to go global.
Yeah, but what are they missing now? What is the one thing?
The one thing that they're missing in order to go global, or
to go globally? These companies that you've seen.
I don't know if they're missing anything. Maybe some funding sometimes helps, but
well, that's what you are here for, right?
If you have the right product, it's going to go.
Yeah, you have a lot of experiences, and Hungary actually has like 5 or 6 globally successful startups. So,
yeah, I would say what I would say in Hungary also. I have a very strong bias for global companies, global traction companies. We all have the same amount of time in our lives. Why would we waste with a limited market? Why not go for the largest market that is possible and turn it around as many times as we can? Obviously, depending on our each personal preference, what we think is important in life. But I would always err for a global company or a global startup as opposed to a local company. A local company usually has local problems, and that you don't want that. I mean, typically in a global company you can get away with a lot more. Obviously, the competition is a lot bigger, but you can learn a lot more too. And I can only second the advice that go out there and learn how it is being done in Israel, in the US, in Australia, wherever.
But you have one successful startup that sold to Yahoo that was only in Hungary, right? They didn't travel to the United States, right?
Yes, they did travel to the United States. They actually wanted to, it's called Index Tools. It started by a guy who is now 32 years old. He had to start the company because he couldn't get a job. So what he did, he wanted to sell his software, which was a web analytics software. He wanted to sell it to Germany. But Germans wouldn't buy from Hungarians, so he actually set up a company in the U.S., in New York, and he made the phone calls from New York, and then he could sell the business. He didn't take any investment from anybody, and he sold his company to Yahoo at a very high price. He was a very strategic guy, and he's only 32, so he's just getting going.
Okay, that's a really encouraging story for, I believe, most of you. So. Recipes: don't take any VC money, move to Hungary, sell your company to US, and then sell it back,
and talk to me.
And talk to me, right. But don't take any money from him, right? Okay, guys, thank you very much. It was very